Hello YouTube, this is my video about Asperger's Syndrome symptoms, and basically what I'm going to be talking about is when is something an Aspergic symptom and when is something an issue that would affect anybody whether they had Asperger's or not. I think that argument's kind of academic in many ways, and I'll come on to that, but that's basically what I'll be talking about in this video. I'm not going to be going into the depths around what all the different Aspergic symptoms are. I will talk about how it touches me, but that's not really the purpose of the video. It's when something is really an Aspergic symptom and when it's just something that could affect anybody, because an awful lot of what affects us could equally affect a neurotypical person, I think, or somebody who doesn't have Asperger's anyway. I've tried recording this video a couple of times already and even posted it online, but I took it down because I didn't like how stressed and intense I looked in it, and when I spoke I was very, very stilted. And my whole channel is going to be about Asperger's syndrome, and I don't want to let you see something where I don't want to create an impression that I manage things well all the time and that Asperger's doesn't really affect me too much, or that I've found all answers to dealing with stuff and that I can manage my condition well all the time, because that's certainly not the case. So yeah, this video I probably look kind of tense. I'm trying to look at the camera rather than look at the screen at the moment, so I can't really tell how tense I look. But I probably look kind of tense. It's probably slightly off-putting, but I wanted to show you the full picture rather than show you the side of me that I like to try and present when I'm out and about. So anyway, I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome about 8 months ago, and before my diagnosis I wanted to find out what symptoms I seemed to have, to figure out if I was likely to be Aspergic and whether I should go ahead and go for the test, the diagnosis. I also wanted to have an idea of how likely it was to be diagnosed with Asperger's when I went. And since then, what I've been wanting to do is find out what symptoms I have so I can figure out how to manage them. And that's been a very positive thing. To be fair, some of the symptoms I knew I had before I was diagnosed, for instance, labels in the back of clothing, or down in the inside of clothes, they have always irritated me. And a lot of my clothes will have the labels ripped out rather than cut out, because it's got to a point where it's been frustrating for me and uncomfy, and it's driven me to distraction, so I've ripped them out rather than just cut them out nicely. I knew about that before I had Asperger's. The thing I didn't know, for instance, was that things like ribbed cuffs, textured cuffs, or textured clothes used to be slightly uncomfy for me as well. And wearing them for an hour or something wasn't an issue. Wearing them for the whole day, to come home from being out, and the first thing I'd do is I'd come home and take them off and put on something more comfy. And since I found out I have Asperger's and I realised that, well, actually, that's just a skin sensitivity I have, I've given myself permission to do something I knew about for a lot longer. So now I just wear clothes that are soft all the time, or clothes that are comfy at any rate, and I won't wear things that are uncomfy. And I should have been doing that even before I was diagnosed. I should have just realised, oh, that I just don't like it and I'm not going to do it. But I needed to have the diagnosis to let myself do this stuff. So that was positive. That's a positive side of knowing something is an Aspergeric symptom. What has sparked off the question for me was, when is something... Well, I don't want to start attributing every little difficulty I have to Asperger's and then saying that I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to go and see this person because I have Asperger's, or I'm not going to go out with my friends to the pub because I have Asperger's, or I'm not going to go to your wedding because I have Asperger's. I don't want to start using it as an excuse to get out of anything and everything. I think what I need to do is find ways of deciding what's important in my life, what I really need to do, and then making sure I can manage around that. And that's the healthy way to do things. That's what's going to work for me. The rest of the stuff I can let slip. I don't need to do everything all the time, and then saying, look, sorry, I've been at college today and I'm wiped and I don't want to come out tonight, and you know how I am. Or at that point, maybe not saying it like that, but chalking it up to Asperger's then is fair enough, so long as I'm doing the important stuff and not living like a hermit. So what got me... This is kind of academic, like I said earlier on, but what I started thinking about was, when is something an Aspergeric symptom and when does it apply to someone who doesn't have Asperger's? For instance, I find it very, very difficult to go to weddings. I get very anxious and stressed and tense beforehand. And I've been to as many weddings as I haven't. I've gone intending to go to people's weddings and then backed out at the last minute. But someone who doesn't have Asperger's can, find things like that, just as difficult, or almost as difficult or more difficult. But when something... Because when you talk about Asperger's, like you talk about things like, certainly in my case, I don't like going into busy places like cafes a lot of the time, or into busy restaurants. I don't like really going to the pub with friends. I can find it very hard to go into the high street, especially around Christmas time, for instance, when it's absolutely heaving with people. But an awful lot of that kind of stuff, that could be anybody. You don't need to have Asperger's for that. So, but I was thinking, but these are Aspergeric symptoms for me. These are, you've got the trigger. The trigger is, the situation, for instance, the high street with hundreds of people in it. That's a trigger for me. So, that points it's an Aspergeric symptom. And then I started wondering, well, actually, do neurotypical people have that too, don't they? And what my brother had said to me was that something is an Aspergeric symptom, whether something is an Aspergeric symptom depends on the degree and the frequency. So, firstly, you have your diagnosis. So if you've been diagnosed with Asperger's, you know it could be a symptom. So you've passed the first, or you've checked the first box. The second question is, maybe relating to, where it fits in terms of a symptom on perhaps the triad of impairments. The third one, I think, relates to the degree and the frequency. Now, for me, being around people is difficult at the best of times, even if I'm relaxed, calm, and in good humour. But it's still difficult for me. For instance, if I walk down from my flat to the town centre, I find it difficult when I've got people walking up the pavement towards me. I don't know where to look. I don't know how I look. I start getting very anxious, and I don't know how I'm going to seem to them. Do I look happy? Do I look sad? Do I look miserable? Do I look like an idiot? I worry about all of these things all of the time. It's 10 hours. Sorry about that. I worry about these things all of the time. And it's a stressor for me. So this applies to me all of the time. So that answers the frequency thing. Being around people, especially people I don't know, is the trigger, and it applies all of the time. It doesn't necessarily have to apply all of the time. It just needs to be, most of the time. For instance, fans, I hate the noise that fans make, and I get very anxious very quickly most of the time. Sometimes they don't bother me, but that's maybe if I'm thinking about something else, or I'm in the zone with something I'm doing, that kind of thing, and I can then kind of switch that noise off in my head, or it lessens the impact it has on me. But again, fans affect me pretty well most of the time. Not like just 5% of the time or 15% of the time, but fans affect me 80-90% of the time. People affect me pretty well 95% of the time. It's the frequency. It's there so much. It never goes away. It's never going to go away. The extent's the next thing, I think. Something like a wedding. Going to a wedding or being at a wedding, I get very anxious. I feel very tense. I can clam up. I start to overload and begin to shut down. I'll stop talking. I'll stop taking things in. I'll be so concentrated on how I feel. Feel the tension in my body. I'll maybe, my throat stiffens up, and my voice changes a lot when I sound tense, or when I feel tense, I sound tense. The extent, there's no question about that. The extent is fairly severe. The extent of the problem is fairly severe. But that kind of matches maybe the trigger. I don't know how someone who's neurotypical would find something like that. I don't know if they'd react so strongly. I guess maybe the majority of people who have problems with weddings would react strongly, but maybe not so strongly. But that one would be very, very open to debate. The question, or a more pertinent example, I think, would be fans. Fans can stress me inordinately. I get really, really stressed with them, and they're not a big deal. It's a fan. It makes a whirring noise. Why would that really bother anybody? So the level of tension and stress that I feel with fans far outweighs the severity of the trigger. So I think that's quite a good example. That's quite a clear-cut example of something that's maybe an Aspergic. It's a trigger for me, and then it shows an Aspergic symptom. Maybe with another one might be how tidy the house is, or how crowded the house is. I like to have, if you can see around me, behind me at the moment, this room's a wee bit more untidy than I want. But basically there's relatively little furniture in this room, and it's quite a comfy place for me to be. There are other houses that I go into, and there's lots and lots of furniture and lots of stuff on the furniture, books, toys, ornaments, things like that. And that overloads me. It makes me feel tense. And again, I would suggest that would show an Aspergic symptom, because the trigger, my response to it is far stronger than the trigger would suggest it should be. I know maybe a person wouldn't like the decoration, or think, yeah, it's just a wee bit cluttered in here, or something like that. They may not like it, or they may think, oh, this place is just a wee bit untidy. And, it could cause stress that way. Well, I don't know if it would cause stress as such, but you might not like it. But I'd think that the Aspergers symptom is that it causes actual stress. It causes you to become uncomfortable, and can actually lead towards a meltdown when it's coupled with other things that are going on. You know, in itself, a cluttered house or an untidy place would maybe be irritating or uncomfy, but not the end of the world. But you know, it's just one of these things that works away at me. It works away at me and erodes me over the course of the day. Couple that with things like other noises, you know, several people talking at once, wearing rough, uncomfy clothes. All of that kind of stuff put together will then lead to a meltdown for me, or could lead to a meltdown for me. So I would say that's an Aspergers symptom. So yeah, that's my thoughts on it. I think it's kind of academic, you know, like I've said a number of times already before, because you know, you just have to find out what you want to do and then try and figure out ways to deal with it, whether it's an Aspergers symptom or anything else, whether you have Asperger's or you don't. But I've had conversations with people when they've said, so what is Asperger's? And I've said, well, you know, I've listed a number of symptoms, and they say, oh, I have that. And then, you know, I don't know if some of them have actually directly doubted that Asperger's is a valid thing, or have simply thought, well, I know it doesn't really sound anything different from anything I have, so, you know, what's he worrying about? He's just whinging, basically, or he's just complaining. So, aye. Okay, right, I'm going to end the video, and I don't really know how to end them, but, you know, hope that's been useful. I'd really like to hear what people's responses to that are. And okay, I think that'll do for now. Okay, bye.